G'day, and how you doing? G'day, Chewy man, how you doing?
Good, mate.
You feeling well? You feeling good? You feeling up?
I am feeling pretty good. I've had the validation of an internet impulse purchase turning up today.
Ooh, what was that?
Be very, very happy. It's something that I will use every day. I swear. It is my drinking horn.
So who have you got the horn for? Literally.
Hey, look, if I do it this way, it looks like a penis. But yes, isn't it good when you buy something online and it turns up and it's decent? So yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm addicted to buying caps at the moment. Funnily enough, those ones
I wouldn't have picked that for you.
Those ones up there. Though the last three that I bought, I buy minor league, so American baseball caps, but for minor league teams. So those ones behind me are for a team called the Fireflies, all three of them. And this time around, I tried to get a few different ones. And for the first time today, I went, I wonder where they're at. And I had a look and I tracked them. And I'm like, 17th of August, they're expected to arrive. And then I went, because these caps are called 5950s, right? That's the brand of them. And I went, I wonder if I could get some 5950 caps printed for BHN, like some official 5950s printed for BHN. And I went, and I thought I might put an order in and see what happens.
Oh, yes.
So I've put an order in for 24 caps. And I think these ones are, because these are fitted caps, because I've got a big old fat head, right? So if I do this, look at the hair. Isn't that ridiculous? So see, they're fitted. They've got no snap thing on the back. So I'm not really going to do that, because if you do that, you kind of have to get 100 caps, because then you have to get there's 12 sizes, and so I'm thinking about getting snapbacks, which are the ones that they up and snap in behind. And I've put in an order, and they are yet to tell me how much. So if they come back to me and that seems reasonable, I might order them. And
we need 100 people in the chat.
Well, I'm thinking about maybe there's a way that people might want to become members. I've got a whole bunch of t-shirts sitting over there with this logo on it, the bearded man logo on it. Mm-hmm. And I've actually got some caps with that bearded man logo on it. And I thought, maybe the next step in what we're doing, as we've had this very soft launch of going sort of just starting it, and then bringing in the audio podcast, and then doing the Facebook page, and then getting the whatever that thing's called over there. I can't remember what it's called. The thing that on Discord. That maybe the next step would be to do some kind of membership thing for people who wanted to get on board. So I'm investigating it. So that was a portion of my day today. Speaking of Discord, I think I'll share something from Discord that Heretic has put up there. I should drag it across to the screen, because I think it's quite apropos for the conversation of the last 3 nights. And it's this cartoon. Have you seen this one? Gilmore, Barclay, Jamie Lee Ross, Falloon, Walker, Bazant, Smith, and Uffindell saying, honestly, anyone would think we have an ingrained culture and vetting problem. So thank you, Heretic.
I said 8 the other day as an overstatement, but they have had 8 complete dirtbags.
I personally don't know if Nick Smith should be in there on the same sort of level, but but I guess they needed another one.
He went because of bullying a staffer, didn't he? He was a screamer.
Simon says I should buy local baseball team hats like the Auckland Tuatara caps. Our friend Jeremy Elwood is the voice, I think, of the Auckland Tuataras. And I would, but the problem with me is I've got a big old head. Look, and I like fitted caps. Look, see? Fitted cap. These are just sitting on my
The first thing, Pat, is to admit that you don't have a problem.
No, I've got a problem. Got a problem. And then there's those ones up there. And I like this brand, which is 5950. So yeah, okay, fair enough. I'll investigate if they do 5950, which is just purely a brand. It's like, I like Nike, but if they do 5950 caps, because I also know the sizing. I'm a 7 7/8, so I can order it and just it comes and it fits. So David, just to confirm that thing about Smith, he says Smith resigned after admitting he had written on Minister for Accident Compensation Corporation letterhead to the chief executive on ACC on behalf of a former National Party activist. So there you go. I couldn't remember that either. So anyway, yes, I'll look at the Tuataras and some others as well, and if there's some, if they're good. I mean, to be honest, I'm a poser. You know, I like them because I like how they look. It's not that I support a heck of a lot of. I do like watching the old baseball team, but yeah, there you go. So tonight's conversation, we are going to touch on Uffindell, but we're not going to go into the same sort of detail we have been going into over the last wee while. We're actually going to have a look at Shane DePoe and Matthew Hooton on this morning's breakfast show, because it was, I think, quite an insightful conversation. And, you know, credit's due. Matthew Hooton made some really interesting and valid points about what's going on at the moment, and they also spoke to the bigger issue of what's going on in the National Party at the moment. We're not going to play all of it. They did have a conversation around what's going on in Labour as well, but I guess we're talking about National not because Labour's not worth talking about, but they are sort of the headline news. In fact, there's so much the headline news. I'll show you something. Go to Today FM, because we're going to do a story from Today FM today as well. So if we go to Today FM, let me just bring the screen back up. And if you go to the opinion page of Today FM, opinion, check this out. So this is new. The All Black one is new. So that wasn't there when I last looked. Uffindell, monkeypox, Uffindell. So it's not just us who have talked about this. This has been the topic du jour in New Zealand this last few days. We are going to have a look at that, because I think that kind of is an interesting overview perspective. We're also going to have a look at what's happening with every single MP outside of Labour is fighting Labour at the moment, based on their response to wanting an inquiry about the COVID economic response. So National and the Greens and the Māori Party and ACT are all joining up together to call the government out, which I think is I don't know if it's quite unprecedented, but it's certainly a very rare occasion that, you know, those kinds of bedfellows would all get together and say to the government, what the, can you please explain? So we'll have a bit of a quick look at that. There's not a whole lot of information. It was on News Hub tonight as an exclusive report, which just simply means they don't have that they're the only ones to be reporting it, which actually means there's not a lot of information out at the moment. Probably tomorrow we'll find out more about it, but we will have a look at that. Also, Trump in there, Chewy, just for you, mate. And there's actually a really interesting story, and I've already tweeted about this, to do with, in fact, maybe we'll just, no, we'll leave that. We'll do it later on. The interesting story that I'm sure David Seymour is going to get behind, because we all know that David Seymour wants everyone to be treated the same under the law. Right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
He's very clear on that.
Core value.
Yep. So we have got a story that I'm sure I've already tweeted at David Seymour, and I'm sure he is going to get strongly behind, because there is currently some people who are not being treated equally under the law. And I'm sure, we've been talking about integrity this week. If David Seymour is a man of integrity, he will definitely get behind this, and it'll be something he'll want to get on with. So you can pick, Chewy. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Grant Robertson and the economic issue? Do you want to start with Trump, or do you want to start with Hooton and Shane DePoe?
Let's rip the Band-Aid. I want Trump.
Okay.
I want his beautiful hair. I want his completely sane supporters. I'm sure everybody's seen Reason, and everyone's cooperating with law enforcement. Am I right in that? I have been looking at the news today.
100%.
Yeah.
So
okay, cool.
There was some new information coming out today about Trump and about what's happening with Trump. Now, what's happening?
What an excellent freeze frame, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
You're doing her all sorts of favors.
I'm actually not a freeze frame. That's actually, look, it's on 0, 0. It's actually the start of it. It's their fault, not mine. So we remember. Hang on. So Trump is in depositions today over one of his series of charges, and as a part of this conversation, we're going to get to what they all are. But this is one of the New York Attorney General is asking him questions based around some irregularities around his businesses, right? Where he says publicly that he's worth X amount of billions, and then he says to the tax man that he's worth a lot less so he can pay less tax, and then he says to Forbes that he's worth more, and then he says to the tax man that he's worth less.
Yes.
And then all of us know that he's worthless. No, worthless. When you get that, it's a joke. And so this is what it's all about. So he's in depositions at the moment. He has his lawyer with him, and they are asking him questions around this. And to give it more of a context, I'll play you the first 60 seconds of this also, and this will give you kind of the snapshot of what we're going to talk about.
The former President Trump departing the New York Attorney General's office a short time ago. This is after he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights, declining to answer questions today during testimony as part of the civil investigation into his business dealings. ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky outside the New York Attorney General's office. So, Aaron, the president just left. What is the very latest on Trump's deposition? And just remind us, please, what are the legal ramifications that he faces?
Deirdre, the former president spent about 6 hours here at the New York Attorney General's office in a 16th floor conference room, declining to answer questions about his business practices, namely the valuations of his real estate portfolio, including a building at 40 Wall Street, just across the street from the very office where he spent the bulk of his day. The stakes are quite high. There could be a civil lawsuit from the Attorney General's office that could, if he is ultimately convicted, result in millions of dollars in fines. But anything that he would have said could also have been used by the Manhattan District Attorney's office, where prosecutors have been conducting a parallel criminal investigation. So it seems as if after mocking people who invoked the Fifth, the former president did it because, as he said in a statement, he felt he had no choice.
So there you go. Part one. Chewy, you want to jump in? You can jump away. And we've got more
look. Let's be fair. And the guy definitely pleading the Fifth is something that people with nothing to hide do. Yeah, like this is what I want. It's not going to make any difference to his supporters. They'll just go in some insane direction about this, that it's a big beat up and that sort of thing. But I'm here for it. I want everything. I want all the dirty laundry. Go, go, go.
So the second part of this that we're going to go to is a story on CNN. Obviously, all these stories were all over the news medias, but the bit that's interesting to me about this is this actually goes through what Trump's current legal problems are. Right. And it lists all of the legal problems. Some of them are civil cases, some of them are criminal cases, but it lists them all out. Now, I know I agree with you, Chewy. His supporters aren't going to change a thing, but I guess logically I kind of go, you know, a little bit sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. However, where there is like 8 or 9 smoking piles, one of them's got to be fire. Just, I mean, like even if not all of them, but one of them when there's a lot. So let's just have a look at the kind of legal trouble he's in right now. This is kind of following on from the conversation around what's happening with the New York Attorney General today.
Here's the big picture when it comes to the legal pressures Trump is facing. 2 Department of Justice probes, one involving classified documents, the other January 6th. There's also the House Select Committee investigation into his role in the insurrection. And then in Georgia, you have Trump's infamous find the votes phone call, the crux of an election interference case. And then there is his taxes, his finances. There are 3 separate investigations here. And today, there was a deposition involving the civil probe in New York. And that's where we want to begin with CNN's Kara Skanal, who's outside the New York Attorney General's office for us. Kara, the big question going into today was, would the former president answer questions or would he assert the Fifth? And he chose the latter.
Yeah, Anna, that's right. That was the big question this morning. And Donald Trump arrived here about 4 hours ago. He's in the building just over my shoulder at the New York Attorney General's office where he is undergoing this deposition. And he's been there for a couple of hours now. And he's asserting the Fifth Amendment. And he said that he wasn't going to answer questions because he said the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, a Democrat, he said her investigation was politically motivated. He also said what solidified his decision was the FBI search warrant on his home in Florida at Mar-a-Lago on Monday. He said that made it clear to him that he didn't want to testify and answer questions under oath.
Like, I actually think he's being truthful there. That solidified he didn't want to answer questions under oath because he's realized perhaps if he answers questions under oath and the investigation. So there might actually be people might hear that and think, oh, yeah, he's making an excuse. But I'm like, well, maybe because of what he realizes the trouble he could be in, it is the reason he's choosing not to answer questions under oath. Perhaps. This has got 20 seconds to go.
You know, in a very lengthy statement, he made all of these allegations, but I'll read you a part of it in which he said, I once asked, if you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? Now I know the answer to that question when your family, your company, and all the people in your orbit have become the targets of an unfounded, politically motivated witch hunt.
So the answer to that question, if you're innocent, why are you pleading the Fifth? The actual answer to that question is because the answer you may give could incriminate you in a crime. That's actually literally why you plead the Fifth. So the answer to the question is, so I don't incriminate myself of a crime. Now, we've heard a little bit about him, those two clips talking about, how he's mocked people in the past for pleading the Fifth. So I thought, this is from 2018. I thought we should actually have a look at what Donald Trump has said. Now, I know many people would have seen this before, but I was seeing this going on through various social media sites today. But this clip here has a lot more than I was quite aware of. It was almost one of his tropes. Lock her up, build that wall, people who plead the Fifth. You'll see. There's a lot of them, more than I expected.
Now, the amendment says in part that no person, quote, shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. This is the classic protection against self-incrimination. It's also an important protection. But in popular culture, pleading the Fifth has often been equated with guilt. Which brings us to President Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, who has decided to plead the Fifth in the Stormy Daniels lawsuit, which brings us further to all of the things President Trump has said about what it means to plead the Fifth.
When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth, so they're not prosecuted, I think it's disgraceful. If you're not guilty of a crime, what do you need immunity for? Pleading the Fifth Amendment, pleading the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment in the Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment.
Oh, hang on.
Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Horrible. You see, the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? Have you ever seen anything so corrupt in your life? Have you ever seen a greater embarrassment to our country? Fifth Amendment. Bob.
Whatever that last thing was. It's just, once again, it's the shell game. Yeah, we've talked about this for a couple of weeks now to do with various parties. So this is the statement he put out, which has already been referenced once before. I once asked, if you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? Now I know the answer to that. The statement said, when your family, your company, and all the people in your orbit have become the targets of an unfounded, politically motivated witch hunt supported by lawyers, prosecutors, and the fake news media, you have no choice. So again, it's the same as we've talked about for other political parties, that when they do it, in this case, they're guilty of a crime. When I do it, I have good reason. Move those shell games around. When Labor employs 3% more in the public sector, that's a waste of money, and we're disrespectful with taxpayers' money. But when National want to get coaches for young people on the dole, adding a line of bureaucracy, that's because it's sensible. It's a good spend. When a 16-year-old who offends gets a second choice under Labor, a second chance, under Labor, then they're soft on crime. When a 16-year-old who offends then becomes a national MP, they've turned their life around. It's the shell game. It's the shifting it. If it doesn't fit my narrative, I'll just say the opposite, and I'll say, well, I'm doing it for good reason, whereas they don't. They're wasting money, or they're wasting time, or they're being soft, or whatever it is. And it is the dictionary definition of hypocrisy.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think Trump is well, obviously amazing, because there's always a tweet where he's tweeting against himself. Like you can go back years, months, weeks, and there'll always be a tweet where it's like, he said about Hillary, there's no way that you could be president while you're being investigated by the FBI. The fact that he's talking about law enforcement, and then oh no, corrupt law enforcement. They're corrupt now because they're after me. What's it like inside his head?
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Crazy man.
I heard a commentator today talking about the kind of, this whole thing about for the past 5 years, the right has been talking about the loony left and the far left activists wanting to defund the police, and they're now all calling for defunding the FBI. And I heard a commentator say today very clearly, it's not that they want to defund the FBI. The truth is they want to be able to use the FBI or the CIA or the police to go after their people. But when you come after us, that's not okay.
Yeah. We cross now live to Fox Studios. Just must be losing their minds. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, so that's kind of an update on that, and obviously the FBI raid is still going on. It's just fascinating because I saw a comment from Laura Ingram today. I think she was on Sky News Australia. I just saw it and I clicked on it from YouTube, and she said something about the way she worded it was like, she was being dismissive about what had just happened to Donald Trump and the FBI raid by saying, we need to know what's going on. And I was like, well, actually, yes, that's the point. We need to know what's happened. We need to know why they've gone in. We need to know what's going on. And the way we find out is they do an investigation.
Yeah.
She was saying it like, what's going on here? What's going on? We need to know. And I'm like, yeah, we need to know. And it's a little bit like there's a lot of left-wing commentators at the moment kind of going, defund the FBI, sure. So the right's throwing it out there like a threat, and a lot of the more progressive left-wing commentators are going, okay, we'll support you on that. Sure, let's go for it. So they're obviously not going to defund the FBI or the CIA. It's just all theatre at the moment, but it's interesting theatre.
Yeah, it would be absolutely insane for them to do it.
Well, they can't.
They've had massive interference in the last two elections. Well, look, that might be the end game when you think about it. They're calling for the defund the FBI, so there's less eyes on the next interference in the next election,
maybe,
which is obviously very important for them. I don't necessarily think that's crazy. You got to see who's going to benefit. There's always an angle.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Yep, so we'll keep an eye on Trump. His story continues. There are also people saying that the reason he's making noises about declaring for 2024 so early, because this would be very early to declare for 2024, is because then he can also play the card, they just don't want me to run. He can also, and then also actually those same agencies might have a different perspective about investigating someone running for president because they don't want to be seen or they can't really influence the outcome. So one of the reasons he may declare sooner rather than later is to try and help him take the pressure off him from this. But there's lots of people within the GOP at the moment saying they're worried and who are actually saying privately, where there's smoke, there's fire. What's going on here? And even though they won't say that publicly, there are a lot of reports from people who have insiders who say within the GOP, there's a lot of concern. All right. Speaking of inside the GOP and having lots of concern, let's have a look at what's happening in National at the moment. Yes, we are. It is still kind of referencing Uffindell, but it's not entirely about him. It's more about what some of our commentators, and one of the things we do here, if you're just joining us for the first time, is we like to commentate on the commentators. We like to hear what they've got to say and make sure that you're aware of what people are saying about various topics, around the country and around the world. And this is Matthew Hooton and Shane DePoe this morning on TV NZ Breakfast. And we're going to start with Shane DePoe talking. We've talked openly about the redemptive story that people are entitled to, and can work. And that's an important word. Can work towards. And no one, I don't think, certainly not me, certainly not Chewy, is anti a redemptive story. But there is an element of mahi that needs to go in with that. There is an element of contrition. There's an element of what you need to do. And Shane tells a story here, and actually Matthew Hooton kind of backs him up about if you are going for redemption, then that's actually a part of your story. It doesn't hide away in the background.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually a part of who you were. I was this person. I'm a better person now. This is who I am today, which means, I guess without saying it overtly, he's saying, well, I'm interpreting him saying that if you're not making it a part of your core being today to sell yourself, then you haven't gone through it. It's not redemption. It's just now he hasn't said that. That's my add-on addendum, but that's what I'm getting. Should we just have I've kind of butchered it. He says it much more eloquently than me, obviously. Let's have a look, eh?
I believe in redemption. I'm a benefactor of redemption. My life is an open book. I believe that people need and should have second choices. I went to a school called Kawerau College. I saw my mates go off the Borstal. They didn't get redemption. They didn't get a second chance, and many of them 50 odd years later are still trapped in that poverty prison cycle. So I do believe in second chances. I do believe in redemption, but I also do believe in equity, and I think that if second chances are given, it has to be equal across the board, and we don't see that in many circumstances, because sometimes privilege gets you out of problems.
Yeah, good saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was an alcoholic from my early teens to my early 40s, with all that comes with that. So, you know, I'm not going to be sanctimonious towards him. But he spoke about impunity. He spoke about a lack of accountability. And I would have thought that if events in your teens and your 20s of this nature had such a impact on you that 20-something years later you went to apologise to people, well, I mean, I've apologised to people, then that would become part of your narrative. That would become one of the reasons you went in politics. It would mean that you would have an empathy towards people, as Shane's talking about, and you wouldn't make your maiden speech about the need to crack down on young offenders and have no forgiveness.
It was very...
Shall we?
It's always dangerous when two political commentators on different sides of the argument start agreeing.
Well, it's dangerous probably to national. It's dangerous to
absolutely.
Sam Uffindell, yeah.
I love when these two get their heads together, though, because, I mean, these guys have been in the peripheries of both parties for such a long time. Hooton's quite happy to call it how it is. I mean, I don't necessarily like his analysis a lot of the time, but when he's right, he's right. And I think in this case, he's right.
I think possibly, and I don't want to, you know, last night we said something positive for about a half second about the Clintons and then got accused of being kind of Clintonites. But I think it's fair to say that at times I feel Matthew Hooton, or maybe at all times, like we say, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You know, we can sit ourselves firmly on the left, but as we're going to start talking about shortly, when Labor needs to be told to pull their head in, or the Greens as well, people on the left will do that as well. And I think that's the reality of kind of honest dialogue, not partisan dialogue. And so I think I see that in him as well. Obviously, it always comes from the perspective he is, and probably his core stuff will always come from there to do with, you know, finance and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that at times I hear that as well, calling a spade a spade. Second clip is talking, actually Hooton starts this off talking about, you know, the kinds of people we will have in Parliament. We will have drunk drivers, etc.
Our political, we do not want a parliament of saints.
Absolutely.
We want a House of Representatives, and there will be drunk drivers, and there will be former bullies, and there will be alcoholics, and there will be people that did stuff like Shane's done, and they will be in our parliament, and that's good. I think what is required, though, especially in a world of social media, is that people do, you don't have to give every detail of everything you've done, but you have to acknowledge you're a flawed person, and that is part of who you are, and he failed to do that, and that's his political problem.
And let's roll straight into the next clip, because the next clip is talking about now that they've kind of spelt that out, they talk about the ongoing problems in the National Party.
And I think the issue here is not him, right? He's toast.
Yeah, he's.
I think the best thing he can do is just agree to be an independent, not cause a by-election, and just do whatever constituency things he has to do as MP for Tauranga for the next year. This really is about the ongoing problems in the National Party and their selection processes and their governance. And, you know, after everything that happened with Andrew Falloon, he was the worst, I think, but also Jack Bezant, and then there's others who I don't think are in the same category as those two. You know, National needed to make sure that, not that they got a saint necessarily, but that they were properly investigating people's background, and that there was the disclosure that the delegates deserved. And the National Party, if he had got up in front of the 60 National Party delegates and said, I'm going to tell you a story about when I was a teenager, it would have been incredibly, and he would have won 60-0 with those National Party delegates are not unreasonable people, but this was kept from them by the most senior levels of the party, and that is the real problem here.
Anything you want to add in there, Chewie?
I think there's so many layers to this. When we had quite a few chats about this at work today, and it's real easy to get lost in the weeds about what we're actually talking about.
Right.
Like I brought up what he's been accused of doing, both things, and then straight away it's like, well, at what point does it not inform the type of person that he is? Does people not deserve redemption and that sort of thing? And then that spreads off into talking about hypocrisy and the fact that Materia Ture was completely crucified for something arguably less serious than this, and she was driven from Parliament. But it's at the end of the day, it's not those are some of the issues. The key one is that the major opposition party can drop the ball so badly again and again and again, putting forward candidates to represent regions and represent their party. If I was a voter in Tauranga, I'd be furious, because now my representation is gone. They could have had someone better, and now they've got to put up with this lame duck for a year. Do we think he's going to do a good job? I mean, the proof will be in the pudding, but he's looking at 12 months and gone.
Yeah, and he won't do any job because Labor has a majority, so National doesn't need his vote to try and put anything through. It's like, so no one can stop anything Labor's doing anyway, so he literally will do nothing. Interesting that both of these guys, Hooton in particular, talking about that he should stay and be an independent primarily to not force a new by-election. Hard pill to swallow for National, but then again, so's another by-election. Hard pill to swallow as well. So,
I thought on that overnight, and I'm just like, that's the best thing. Like, sit in the corner, shut the fuck up, and think about what you've done.
The naughty step, as unacceptable naughty step. I want to play. I don't know too much about. Maybe you know more about this than I do. I'm not too clear on this, but this got put on our Discord as well last night, and it is from Jennifer Ward. Some people will hate the words she's using because some will find them inflammatory, but it references Materia Ture that you just spoke of, and I think it's fair to, if nothing else, for people to hear what she says about what happened to Materia as well, and then we'll go back and finish the breakfast clips.
When National's newest MP, Sam Uffindell, was 16, he and 3 other boys viciously gang-bashed a 13-year-old child. And he's also admitted that there were others that he beat and bullied. National stood by their man, saying there has to be room in Parliament for people who have made serious errors. And yet in 2017, Materia Ture was hounded into resigning for benefit fraud in the 90s, that she did so her and her daughter could survive during a time when National was dismantling the welfare state. For me, this highlights 3 structural issues. 1, the culture of white supremacy means brown people are more harshly policed and punished. 2, the culture of capitalism means poor people are demonized and blamed for their poverty. And 3, the culture of sexism means it's more normal to ridicule and shame women. This Sam Uffindell episode is a symptom of the deep myths in our culture that help to maintain a hierarchical social structure that props up people like Sam and puts down people like Materia.
Yep. Want to add anything?
Look, there'll be people that don't like hearing that. I happen to agree with it. Like, sometimes hearing words like white supremacy, my mind automatically goes toward skinheads and neo-Nazis. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the structures that exist in our society that seem to constantly benefit people like Sam and come down on people like Materia. So yeah, 100%. You got to sit there and listen to it.
Yeah, and like, to be honest with you, I rally a little bit against the concept of white supremacy in that sentence. But then when you spell it out as you just have, you kind of go, yeah, fair enough, fair point. And if you're more comfortable with the term white privilege than white supremacy, that sits better for you as a way of like sitting cognizantly with you, then use that. But that's the vibe of it. White people having a superior place in society just because they're white. Let me say this as well. If there's anyone watching, there's probably not who has a problem with the word about privilege. I said this once, and I probably will mess it up a little bit, but it just kind of came off the top of the dome, and I quite like it. The idea of privilege, right? So what privilege is any benefit or bonus you have that you haven't earned, that you don't deserve, that has been thrust upon you. Yeah? So therefore, if your parents are wealthy through your dad's hard work or your mum's hard work, and because of that, you have access to a lot of things that you've done nothing to get that advantage. Like you were literally born. That was it. That would be a classic example of someone who has like a wealth privilege. If the courts treat you better because of the color of your skin, and that's not even debatable anymore, that's not the case. Right, the world over, Māori get sentenced more harshly than their Pākehā counterparts for committing the same crimes. Right, there's nothing you've done to get less melanin in your skin. You're offered a reward or a privilege for it. So basically, that idea of, and this is, you can add something to this, Chewie, or disagree with me, but that's how I think of it. It's nothing that you've done, nothing that you've earned, but a privilege or a benefit you have been given because of those things. Yep. That's what a privilege is when we're talking about wealth privilege or white privilege or whatever the other privileges you want to put out there. And in this instance, I absolutely think white privilege and Sam Uffindell is a huge part of this. I said it on the first night, and I'll say it again now.
Yep, 100%. And a lot of people get hung up on, privilege. I haven't lived a privileged life. I haven't had things handed to me. It doesn't mean that. It means that there are inherent advantages to your situation that someone doesn't have.
Yeah, haven't earned.
Yep, I haven't come from a wealthy family. Okay, that doesn't mean that I haven't skimmed out on things that other people with a different skin tone or a different gender, they wouldn't have had the advantages that I had. In my run-ins with the law, would I have been dealt with more harshly? Would I have got the chances that I've received at the hands of police if I was a different skin color? Statistics suggest yes. So yeah, like, I freely acknowledge that I have the privilege of being, a straight white male. That does not mean that I have had everything given to me. It doesn't mean that I've had an easy ride in my life, but you can't not acknowledge that those things exist.
Yeah.
And if Sam has had that through private schools and the sort of jobs and work and advantages that he's had, has he acknowledged that? Would he be able to say the same thing? I don't think he could.
Well, look, I just think we go back to that idea that it feels like basically he cut a deal with the principal. Now, this is my emotive words, not what's been reported. And the deal was, we're asking you to leave. You leave and shuffle off quietly, and that'll be it. We're going to actually get to a conversation shortly about the culture of boarding and boarding schools, because that's a part of this conversation that's surrounding Uffindell, but not necessarily about Uffindell. And we... it's like a deal was done. Like, if you just go away quietly and go elsewhere, then we'll call it even. Yep. That's the punishment. Because remember what we talked about in the last two nights, the crime that he committed. And I'm happy to say, in my honest held belief right now, there were bed legs used. Right. Mm-hmm. We're going to hear a story shortly about what happens to what was called third formers in Kings in 1993. So I'm more than happy to accept that, especially because Uffindell didn't say that didn't happen. He basically said, I can't confirm whether that did or didn't happen. So I'm happy to, my honest held belief is that is the case. Now, if that is the case, he committed a crime that could have gotten him sentenced to 5 years in prison. as an adult, because it was assault with a weapon. Now, he was cut a deal by the then principal to shuffle off, right? And so that's privilege, because I don't know anything about his parents. I don't want to cast aspersions on his parents, but, daddy might have had a good lawyer. Mummy might have had in 1999, whatever the version of a series of Karens around her to make life hell for the principal. Who knows? But a deal was made that he went away quietly and he didn't have to face anything other than going away quietly.
It could have even just been the school. The school didn't want their reputation damaged.
Sure.
And that has often been the case with these type of institutions, that it's worth hushing up these things so it doesn't affect their other activities.
Yeah, let's have a look at this last clip from breakfast this morning. Has Luxon handled the situation well? Has his leadership done well?
Yes, I think initially he didn't overreact, because leaders of political parties get allegations like this put to them at least every week by one of their team. But then when the Otago University allegations came out, which seemed to show a pattern, he acted decisively. Maria Dew, the QC, I mean, she is absolutely impeccable. If she clears Uffindell, people will be able to have confidence in that judgment.
Won't happen.
But he's put it in a process around it, and I think what he's shown is he does have leadership skills, although he seems to be surrounded at the party HQ by a bunch of numpties who are letting him down again.
I disagree with Hooton, because I think that he, at the very least, should have been stood down immediately. Because remember, now they're going, oh, there's that other incident at Otago University. No, because he said in his conversation that this happened and there were other incidents. So we knew more would come out. I think it was actually poor leadership to basically roll with the punches, to give him your support, to say he's a man of character. Because like I said last night, and like has been made about Miteria, actually, I mean, you could, all those arguments about it happened 22 years ago can be made about it happening 19 years ago.
Yep.
This was something that happened 19 years ago. Remember, all those character references that were given to Uffindell were still given to him after he was at university. So all the investigation that National did were still all the same answers would come out today from those people, because it was all after his schooling. So the evidence that National had that he was a man of good character still stands up, because it was after his schooling, all those character references. And his schooling, I would assume, includes university, and this happened at university. So which is why we said last night, either Luxon was wrong and he's not a man of good character and he hasn't been any good since 16, or he is still a man of good character, because all his character references and stuff came after his schooling. You can't have it both ways. So that's why I think it was poor leadership. That's why I think he jumped too quickly to get behind him. And I think that Luxon has to wear a bit of that. It's an embarrassment for him.
Yeah, I kind of agree with some of the things that Hooton said there. I mean, it was measured. You can't automatically just hang your MPs out to dry straight away. I kind of get where he's going there. But yeah, it hasn't, to me, come across as strong leadership. I would be just like, if you've had something like this land on your lap, someone under you, and you're the leader that has to front the press and that sort of thing, wouldn't you just be like, okay, cool, I'm going to go out there and back you to the nines? Is there anything else that we need to know before I go out there and put my whole ass on the TV?
But remember, the whole entitlement of this, wealthy white bully is that he probably would have still said, honestly, in his opinion, yes, because he thought that was just horseplay at university. He probably wouldn't identify it to actually say, oh no, yeah, there was that thing that I did really bad at university. He'd probably say, and I am making assumptions here, that it was just horseplay, and it wouldn't actually be in the forefront of his mind.
Yeah.
So that's why I think maybe if I'm being a bit harsh, maybe the fair response would be somewhere in between. You don't get my unequivocal support. You don't fucking use terms like a man of good character, because even that, he basically omitted to tell a whole bunch of people the truth. So how do you give a guy the title of a man of good character when he's basically lied all the way through the by-election? What does that say about National? And I was going to say one other thing. I wrote it down. I forgot to say it. The thing that this does do for Labour is it gives them a huge stick, not to necessarily attack Uffindell. I think they've been wise to stay away from that, but to say this, right? If they can't run a candidate selection, how can you trust them to run the country?
Yeah.
You know, that's a huge part of the messaging that Labour has the right to use right now, that they can't even pick the correct person to be in Tauranga. How are they going to pick the correct person to be the head of whatever, or to run the whatever department, or the, you know what I mean? So that's going to be damaging for National as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a look now. We're going to have a look now. There was a very interesting piece written by Alice Stewart at RNZ. Here it is here. Here's the piece by Alice Stewart. Uffindell in the era of boarding school bullies. Now, because I'm partly dyslexic and I like to hear things, actually on Today FM, I think it was Rachel Smalley talked about it. So we're actually going to listen to Rachel Smalley. It's like we're going to have the audiobook version. Rachel Smalley talking about this article. But there's one thing that's really important. And if you've been following me the last couple of nights, you'll know I've said a few times I was at boarding school in 1990, Sacred Heart College in Auckland. King's College was across the way. I can guarantee you, I know of people, I knew people at King's boarding school. So this is in the 90s. And there was, and I'll use the phrase again that I used the other night, and, you know, trigger warnings. It doesn't mean what it sounds like it means. There's this thing called fagging. And fagging is an old term from way back in the 1700s in England, where senior boarders basically get to act as the bosses of the junior boarders. The junior boarders basically become their slaves, for want of a better word. And that
sounds terrible.
That was still happening in King's in 1990, certainly in the early 90s. And so, of course, what comes with that when you're dealing with 16-year-olds who still haven't had their frontal lobes developed is power comes in and they treat them like utter trash. And there are allegations around the world, this has nothing to do with King's or any other boarding school, that often leads to things like sexual stuff as well. So it's a disgusting. This is probably one of the reasons that I reacted so badly to this at the start of the week, is that I was a boarder at Sacred Heart College, and it was an amazing place. None of this shit went on. All great guys. I'm not saying everyone had a fantastic time there. I'm sure there was bullying that happened, you know, run-of-the-mill bullying, not to minimize it, but none of this crap went on. And he's the quintessential example of that kind of person who thinks it's hilarious, who's entitled to his sixth form position, that now he gets to treat the third formers like shit because that's the way it's always been. And that's the thing. So let's have a listen to Rachel Smalley and what she says about the article that we were just looking at. And she's telling the story of some boarders in the 90s at King's, right? And those are the stories that you can read in this article. But we're going to do the audiobook version of that.
So Ella talks to David. He was 12 years old when he entered King's in 1993. On his first night, his very first night, the older kids arrived in groups. These are 15 and 16-year-olds with socks full of tennis or golf balls. And they would hit the younger kids, the new boarders who were half their size, just left home, and leave them covered in bruises. I guess it was some sort of initiation. And David said a punch here and there, or a kick, or someone gets shoved down the stairs or cornered and threatened. That was pretty regular. It was a pretty regular sort of thing, he said. And he says more than anything, he was affected by the culture of fear that violence created. He says there was always a threat and you would never really feel safe, especially if you weren't a jock or on the first 15 rugby team. On a few occasions, he remembers being cornered in the stairwell, called a faggot, and then punched in the face, leaving him with a split lip. In those situations, you just have to choose, he said, between escalating it and defending yourself or just taking it. David said he always just took it instead of fighting back, because if he narked, he said it would make it worse. There was always an undercurrent of violence, and there was always that kind of fear. The kids who were sporty were always first-class citizens, and everyone else was meat for the grinder. Another boy, Simon, said he was filling in as a dorm prefect one night, and they were entrusted to look after the young boys. And he said one night a group of 20 16-year-olds arrived.
Now, think about that. A group of 20. Yeah. Now, that also speaks to the staff of King's in that time cannot have not known about this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I've been a boarder at a boarding school. It is impossible for, and I'll tell you something else I haven't said. I've actually worked as a boarding master as well. So in the early mid 1990s, I went back to Sacred Heart and I worked as a boarding master. So I've been a boarder there and I've worked as a boarding master there looking after fifth formers, right? So I can see both sides of the thing. There is no way that 26th formers can go in after hours to a dorm full of third formers, beat them up, and staff not know. I call bullshit. It is not possible. It certainly was the culture of that school. Just finish this off. There's only another 30 seconds.
To beat up a 13-year-old. He said they arrived and said they wanted to give the boy a hiding.
20 of them.
And Simon said, yes, they could, or they would have turned on him. And he says, I told them, I'll just turn my stereo on so I don't hear. But I could hear over the top of it. And I could hear this boy getting an absolute hiding. And he was crying out for me. And I was supposed to protect him. And I just allowed that to happen. God knows what's happened to him now.
I call bullshit. Yeah. And just think about this. You hear about schools and over in like the UK, you hear about Eton, like these sorts of schools that are prestigious, and they're the leaders of, the financial world in 10, 15 years. They're the ones that go into politicians. That's fucking King's and Auckland Grammar in New Zealand. Now, I'm not speaking to Auckland Grammar. I don't know too much about Auckland Grammar, although I went to St. Peter's for a while as well, which is on the other side of the motorway to Auckland Grammar. But I do know the culture of King's. Those are the leaders of New Zealand in 20 years from now. That was the culture in the 1990s. And I'm speaking to it, I'm testifying to it as a witness, meaning I didn't see it happening in their dorms, but I knew the people it was happening to and who were perpetrating it as well. So I call bullshit on that school. I call bullshit on the staff at that school for not knowing, because you can't not know. I've been in that job at a different school, and I've been a boarder in a school that, thank the good Lord, was fucking good, not like this pile of shit.
Yeah.
Sorry, what for you?
No. Look, I think that's fair. I didn't have that schooling. I went to just a state high school. I didn't stay over, but I mean, you're right. Like for that many students on the move at once, there's no way they could have known. Couldn't have known, I should say.
If I'm fair, let's say something happened one night.
They would have been talking about that through the day. Somebody would have heard something.
This is the thing, like something happened one night and a group of them got away with something, but it was the culture of the school, which means it would have been regular. And I call bullshit that the staff, the teaching, those people did not know. Yeah. Right? It's like, I mean, maybe you don't know this, but for those of you out there of teenagers, your kid will get away with 3 things in a row. By the time they've done the 4th thing, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? You eventually know. If it's the culture of a school, it happens enough that you eventually know. So I call bullshit on that staff, on whoever the principal was at the time, that they can plead ignorance if they try to do that.
Yeah. No, 100%.
I think I might need to get my ukulele out again to calm down a little bit. Let's have a look. Oh, well, I mean, is there anything that we want to mention out of the chat at all? Is there anything you want to throw out there to do with this?
Oh God, I haven't even been looking at the chat. What's going on, fam? Okay, we'll dip back a little bit while you play your calming ukulele. Yeah, I think that took me a little while to get here. Politikiwi saying systemic white supremacy isn't about explicitly promoting skinhead rhetoric, but rather the outcomes created by the state are byproducts of the creators of our system valuing Pākehā first. And that's 100%. Once you see that basically baked into everything we do, that's when you start to understand what people mean by white privilege and white supremacy. It's not a personal attack. It's just the way our system works. We're seeing pushback against those sort of structures with Three Waters and that sort of thing. I remember reading somewhere that if say a privileged or a privileged section of the society has some of those privileges taken away. Like it's fractions of a percentage of the control that they lose, that they then see as oppression. And it's quite often, it's quite funny how much you see that language used lately.
And I mean, not that it doesn't happen here, but all you got to do is watch the GOP at the moment, American politics, and white, evangelical Christian conservatives, and they think they're the most oppressed people in the world because someone said happy holidays to them rather than Merry Christmas.
Yep. Sort of talking about
Penrose High, David, you dirty man.
There you go. You've kicked off the old school ties there now. Went to Penrose High in Auckland. The bullying was so bad that they had to change their name to One Tree Hill College.
David, when were you there? Send us another message.
Let us know in chat when you were there. Look, I mean, the number of comments I've seen in Twitter over the last couple of days of people talking about the reputation that Kings had for bullying and that sort of thing. It's made me think about what my school was like and how quick that culture can change. My school wasn't a prestigious school. It was just one of the co-ed schools in Timaru. But we had a new principal come in. There you go. There's the answer. 80 to 85.
Before me, but
we had a new principal come in, and he was very sports focused. And then suddenly the first 15 and the cricket team and the rugby league boys are getting all of these sort of privileges that they didn't have before. And they started throwing their weight around, and they threw some of that weight at me and my group of friends because we were the weird, bogan, drama people. We were the nerds. They could pick on us easy. And I remember I just got homophobic bullshit at me because I was one of the only two boys doing drama. And I think I gave it back one day. I says, well, you guys are getting changed with a whole bunch of dudes. I've got to share a dressing room with 15 of the hottest girls in school. Who's gay now? Well, interval comes around and I've got 5 of these guys coming after me. We're going to fucking smash you up, Bennett. Word got around at the school that there was a fight on. There would have been 200-300 people come around at lunchtime to see this fight, including 3 teachers. Nothing happened. It was all just words because I just run my mouth. But I went straight to the principal after that, and I says, I need you to keep these guys behind school so I can get a head start. And this man said they haven't done anything wrong. They're just good. They're just good boys. Don't worry about it.
Always being boys.
I got the fucking kicking of my life on the way back from school that day. They pretty much threw me between the wheels of a truck. It was that bad. And I remember, years later, I was down here studying, and I heard that principal's name again. He was the principal of Otago Boys High School for a while. And do you know why his name came up? Because they were talking about a culture of bullying. And I'm like, man, see, that's what it's just one guy at the top who's got his favorites. That's all it takes to upset the structure of things.
Just in the last couple of months, footage of brutal attack at Otago Boys High School, incredibly upsetting.
Yep.
Footage of a brutal attack at Otago Boys High School has spread rapidly around Dunedin and has been labelled as incredibly upsetting by outraged parents, etc., 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 etc. And I've had people bail me up. Some people think because of what we do that we've got to reach and go when are we going to sort out this Otago Boys, all the stuff going on there? It's just, it's not good. It's not good. Oh, Chewy's disappeared. I was going to say as well, I'm sure Chewy's computer just crashed. He'll come back. I was going to say, David, as well, this is a bit of a weird thing because it's quite a specific conversation. My best memories of Penrose High, I was just going to say something to David Chew before we go on, is Penrose High is on, I don't know if it's on Green Lane Road in central-ish Auckland, but in Green Lane. And just up the road from Penrose High used to be Georgie Pie. And Georgie Pie at the time had $1 pies. And so me and all the boys would go to Georgie Pie at 2 o'clock in the morning after we'd been clubbing, and would get, $10, $1 pies. And then in the back of the car, we'd take off our Dr. Martens and our thin ties, and we'd put on our Jordans, and we'd go down to Penrose High. And David, if you went there, you probably know this. There was a courtyard in Penrose High that had a basketball hoop against the wall and a really thick rim, and there was a security light above it. So at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, after people have been clubbing, there'd be cars pulling up to Penrose High where we'd all be playing basketball. So all of us guys who played basketball would be playing like nighttime basketball at Penrose High at 2 o'clock in the morning after we'd been clubbing and after we'd got our Georgie Pies, because there was an outdoor rim that you could hang off, and a security light over it that would stay on because we were constantly moving. Completely by the by, but some memories for David there. David said, yes, done the same. David, being at Penrose High, remembers that. So, yeah, look, it's a shocking thing, and it kind of fills me with a little bit of gratitude for my schooling. I went to Sacred Heart College, which is they call it an integrated school. So it wasn't like a private posh school, because it was Catholic. So it was integrated. So it was part private, part public funded. And it was amazing. And I'm not saying if people ever watch this who go to Sacred Heart College or went to Sacred Heart College had a terrible time, but it was just such a nice culture, great guys. There was always incidents between guys, but this culture that we've been speaking about at King's, it was very different. I remember speaking to boarders about it and being like, what are you fucking talking about? That sounds like 1870s kind of stuff. And they're like, yep, pretty much. Hey, let's jump in just to the last story, because we already said we kind of can't really add a heck of a lot to it, but we'll let people know about it because News Hub had an exclusive tonight. Because they've got an exclusive, there's not a lot of other commentary out there at the moment. There may be tomorrow. But basically, in one voice, everyone that's not Labour, Greens, Māori Party, National, ACT, that's it, are speaking out and calling out the government for their COVID economic response. They want to know these. Actually, I should be careful because I say all the other parties. I think the story says technically members from all the other parties. So I don't know whether it's officially all of the Greens or if it's Chloe Swarbrick. But, we'll find out, I guess, more. Wanting to know about where all the money's gone and what's been spent as a part of the COVID economic response. And I think it's worth looking at and thinking about because, how often do you get the Greens and ACT, the Māori Party and National coming with one accord going, this is not all right, guys. So let's have a quick look at the story.
It's not often you see National, the Green Party, Te Pāti Māori and ACT teaming up. So when they do, it's a big deal.
Politics, man.
For months now, the opposition parties have been calling for an inquiry into the government's COVID economic response, but there's yet to be buy-in from the man in charge of our books.
Right now, when we're still dealing with an Omicron outbreak, that's not the appropriate time, but there certainly will be a time.
If it's not the time for an inquiry now, then when will it ever be?
You can't kick it out forever and ever and ever.
Now News Hub can reveal members from all other political parties have written a letter directly to the Finance Minister, requesting either an independent inquiry or confirmation Labour MPs on the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee aren't being instructed to vote against their requests for one, because that's exactly what they've been doing.
It's very strange to see Labour members of Parliament continually blocking that inquiry.
And now there are questions over whether Grant Robertson's been pulling the strings in the background. In a written question to the Finance Minister, Chloe Swarbrick asked him if he'd had any discussions with Labour members on the committee about the calls for an inquiry. Grant Robertson's response, in terms of his ministerial responsibilities, he hadn't initiated any discussions.
I think that it's been clear from the minister's answer that he does not believe that he's expressed views as a minister, but that very much leaves avenue open for him to have expressed those views as a Labour MP.
As a member of the caucus, we discuss a lot of matters, but as Minister of Finance, I do not have responsibility for the members of the caucus.
Not the clearest message from the country's finance guy, and this cross-party team says their demands will only get louder until an inquiry's set in stone.
So we're clear, we were speaking about caps before, yeah? So Grant Robertson puts on his his Minister of Finance cap, and he says, now, I can't say anything officially, and he goes like that, and he puts on his Labour electorate hat, and he says, we can't do this, lads and ladesses. Now, that's the accusation. And so then when they ask him, they go, well, as the Minister of Finance, I've had no input into that. And so I guess I wonder as well, we are a bit thin on information at the moment, because this was an exclusive to NewsHub. We'll find out more tomorrow probably. Why Labor would push back against it's almost like Labor's pleading the fifth. We come full circle, Chewy. Why they would push back against the inquiry. There's only two logical reasons. One is they're worried what it would show, or two is they don't have the ability to do it yet because, COVID spend is still happening right now.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to wait. And I'm not giving them a break on that. I'm just saying those are the two most logical solutions. Is they can't do one until it's actually kind of spent and finished. Although I guess there's nothing wrong with saying they could do it a current one, but there's more to come. Or two is that it's embarrassing to them and they're worried about the numbers leading up to the election, so they want to keep it under wraps.
Yeah, look, I think it probably is a little bit too early, but I agree with the sentiment. As we keep on saying, this whole thing has been unprecedented, and there's a lot to learn about what we did right, what we did wrong, how does it work in comparison to other countries, all of that sort of stuff. And I don't think it hurts Labor to say, yes, look, there is an inquiry, and this is when we're going to look at it. Say it's next year or whatever.
Yeah.
But you can't just go, nah, it's not the right time, but we'll tell you when. Trust me, we will, because it never plays well.
And it does feel a bit dodgy, that answer. It feels a bit slippery, that answer that Grant Robertson gave.
Yeah.
As the Minister of Finance.
Which is, I think, reasonably unusual for him as well. So that's why it kind of stands out quite a bit for me, of like, oh, you're ducking and weaving. I just want to highlight this chat. Absolutely. Politics, man. Love Chloe Swarbrick.
Meme by the end of the night, please, someone. All right, so look, I said that didn't have too much to add to that. Said that at the start of the show because it's not breaking news, but it's an exclusive, which means everyone else will now be going, oh, did you see that News Hub story? We should chase that up, and we'll find out more about that tomorrow. Yep, go.
If you could jump back to that video as well.
Of Chloe?
No, just the end of that clip. Just something crossed my eye, and I want to see it there. I think it was when Nicola Willis was speaking. Just step it back a little bit from there. Yep, from there, and play from there, and just hit pause.
Your demands will only get louder.
Pause. That's Judith Collins having a sleep. A lovely scarf. I recognise those eyebrows anywhere.
You reckon that's Nun Eyes though, or she's just got mid blink?
It's hard to tell. It might be Nun Eyes. It might just be an absolutely withering glare. No, she moved. Okay, it's all right. Judith Collins is alive. Good to know. I get nervous when you can't see where she is because she could be behind me.
Only if you're talking to a mirror. That's when she pops up behind you. just don't ever do that. Is that rude? Doesn't mean to be rude.
Yeah, as long as you don't bring up Aurovita, it's fine. Yeah.
We're going to wrap up, but before we wrap up, we've got a bit of a campaign for David Seymour to get behind. Because we all know that David Seymour, I have to do this, sorry, it's gross, but I don't know why I'd put chewing gum in my mouth while I'm doing a show. It's ridiculous. So I apologize about that gross symbol. I'll take that out of my mouth so I can talk. We all know that David Seymour is one of the strongest proponents in New Zealand for everyone being treated fairly and equally under the law. We know that, there's no, we should always be treated the same, right? That's part of it. I'm sure Don Brash will get on maybe this is part of Hobson's pledge, that we're all getting treated the same under the law. We should get David Seymour involved because that's part of his bandwagon as well. Because the story came out yesterday, 65-year-old said it's wrong. She gets less New Zealand super for being married. It's discrimination based on marital status, yeah? A married Christchurch woman says it's ridiculous she is paid less New Zealand superannuation than someone who is single and living with another adult. A married person gets the pension of $817.32 a fortnight before tax, compared to $990.20 received by a person sharing with someone who is not their spouse or partner. I have a friend. Sorry, I went on the voice. I have a friend who isn't in a relationship, but she's sharing a house and they share all the expenses, and she's going to end up getting $170-ish more than me a fortnight, which is just plain wrong, said Daphne. What a great old person's name. Says Daphne, who didn't want her last name to be used because of privacy concerns. Now, I thought this exact thing the other day. In fact, speaking of me Teria today, one of the issues that she had was she didn't declare that she was with a partner. Yeah, that was one of the things. I think there was something as well.
No, it was was it a flatmate?
Something, but I also, there was something about voting in multiple electorates, but that could be wrong. I'm a bit cloudy about that, so we'll leave that alone. But the point being, if it had something, all those people who are being hung out over the coals who are getting benefits right now because they're living with their partner and they're declaring themselves as single, actually, I literally thought about this 2 or 3 days ago before I saw or read the story. Actually, why would someone get paid less per person when they're single to when they're in a relationship? If we're all being treated the same under the law, that is the literal definition of discrimination based on marital status. It's the literal definition. And all I'm trying to do is say, if you're going to make all these statements about being the same under the law, of course, the caveat for Seymour is based on race, but then this is actually treating people differently legally based on marital status. It's actually the dictionary definition of discrimination, which if any of you are following me on Twitter, you would have seen this morning. I'd be interested to know, as David Seymour wants everyone to be treated equally under the law, will he stand up against discrimination based on marital status, single people getting more, one rule for all, etc., or does it only apply to issues of race? I think we actually know the answer to that question, but I just wanted to bring up an example, which we like to do to show about the hypocrisy when some politicians will say we should be all treated the same. And then there are hundreds, thousands of examples where we're not treated the same under the law that are acceptable. The only one that seems to not be acceptable is when it's based on race.
Yep. I mean, I think, well, I mean, when you started reading that out, I was like, oh, come on, Dolores, get your hand off it. But yeah, I mean, no, that's fair. Like, I've never liked the fact that beneficiaries have to either conceal their relationships or risk losing their benefit. I don't like that weaponization of relationship status that wins liked using it against people on the dole and stuff like that. Why should it be any different with super?
Yeah. And look, there is a part of me which my tongue is placed in my cheek, obviously, because I'm aware that a married couple or a couple in a partnership, they have one power bill versus a single person may have two. But she makes a point about if you're a flatmate or something, you've only got one power bill as well. However, if we're going to go by the standard that we are being told about by people like David Seymour, which is all equal under the law, then that means there shouldn't be a difference between a single person and a singular married person.
Yep.
I suspect what David Seymour would say, and I did tweet it at him, but I haven't heard back from him, strangely, is something like, well, there's a reason for that. And again, I've said it before, that's the point. If Māori, for example, are suffering worse effects amongst the health system, then there's a reason why the Māori Health Authority might be a good idea. Because there's a reason for it. It's almost like they're going, well, there's never a reason to have differences based on race. Never. There can't be a reason. But, you know, the disabled person in a car park, well, there's a reason for that. Married couple, well, there's a reason for that. Yeah, I agree. There's a fucking reason why sometimes there needs to be extra help in an area that the core grouping of that area is race.
Now, you know, I like the cheap political meme.
Of course.
This has to be a favourite of mine at the moment.
You're going to have to zoom in a bit.
Oh, how do I zoom in, Pat? I don't know the technology.
Yeah,
there we go. National to unveil fresh, exciting, diverse candidates with no dark pasts.
Very good. Freddy Krueger, Jason, who else we got? Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and what's his name from It? Have I got them all?
Yes. Yeah.
Very
That's good. All the
Very
same blue
good.
suits. That's, as we discussed, all it takes is a blue suit, so they're good.
Very good. And remember, we have said before, those guys are very diverse because one of them was wearing a belt and others weren't. And one of them had a bit of a puku and the other ones didn't. So there's a lot of diversity in that group. All right, guys. Hate to love you and leave you, so I'll just leave you. That's us. We're done. Thank you. Thank you, Chewy. Yeah, hold it up again. It just went blurry in the top part of your screen. That's pretty. Have you drunk out of it yet? You must have.
Not yet. I have to clean it.
Yeah.
To keep. Doesn't smell gross.
How much? Are you going to tell us how much? Is it a real? Is it a real horn, or is it like a
real horn with brass inlays?
Wow.
And a little leather holster.
I've always had a bit of a horn for you, Chewy. So
hey, you're hitting me with the same jokes that my wife hit me with tonight.
Yeah, but she can't have a horn for you. She's missing a part, isn't she? I can.
You don't know my wife that well.
Fair. I'll leave it alone. All right, just that's what she said. All right. I think we better go before we get someone coming into the room for you and telling you off on the live stream again. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for we've got a couple of new initiatives coming up. Like I told everyone at the start of the show, if you were with us, about the hats idea, and I think we're going to start up some kind of membership, whether it's a Patreon or whether it's a YouTube membership or something. I think that we've got a nice little core of people around us that seem to want us to do this and be involved. So let's figure out a way that we can be a bit build on this community. You know, you OGs. It'd be good also to get the OGs involved in some kind of group that when we've got 1 million viewers, Chewy, the OGs that have been with us since within the first 100 days are getting some kind of recognition as well. All right, team. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Thanks for joining us tonight. Stay safe. Hooroo.